Howdy y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Southern Steel Show. My name is Brody Huff, I am your host. Today we're going to be just kind of going over some thoughts I've been having recently, all of us do a little thinking from time to time, and as I've been working through the thought process around, say, violence or peace or things like that, it's slowly shifted into a discussion more so about, what is true faith? What is religion? And what is relationship with Christ and all of the examples we have to point to that give us kind of a glimpse at what that relationship is, who God really is. And, in Matthew, when Christ is kind of rebuking the Pharisees, everything he says doesn't just apply to one religion or another. It really applies to every religion outside of Christianity. And I mean every religion. I've already made it clear that I don't put Judaism in the same boat as I put Christianity, because if you know not the Son, then you know not the Father. And if that's not God, then what is it? What are you worshiping if you're not worshiping Christ? And my belief, honestly, I don't think that they're just worshiping some person from the past, or maybe there are just random angels everywhere. I'm like, no. If you're not worshiping Christ, then you're worshiping Satan. And that's the only real option in my mind. And that's why I don't shy away from terms like Christian nationalism or, hey, you're a Christian nationalist. Yeah, I am. You're right. And I'm proud to be one, because if I get what I want, then I'm going to see this country turn around and get better than it ever was, not just go back to how it once was. But going to Matthew, I've got my Bible here. I read a CSB. This one's pretty thick. It's a study Bible. And I've got multiple different versions. I just find that the Christian Standard Bible kind of reads easier for me. And I'm going to go through this encounter that he had with the Pharisees, and I'm just going to read all of 23 from verse 1 until which one would it be? Verse 36 is kind of when that encounter ends. So it's going to be a little long, but bear with me. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples. The scribes and the Pharisees are seated in the chair of Moses. Therefore, do whatever they tell you and observe it. But don't do what they do, because they don't practice what they teach. They tie up heavy loads that are hard to carry and put them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move it. They do everything to be seen by others. They enlarge their phylacteries and lengthen their tassels. They love the place of honor at banquets, the front seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and being called rabbi by people. But you are not to be called rabbi, because you have one teacher, and you are all brothers and sisters. Do not call anyone on earth your father, because you have one Father who is in heaven. You are not to be called instructors either, because you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in the people's faces, for you don't go in, and you don't allow those entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to make one convert, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as fit for hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever takes an oath by the temple, it means nothing. But whoever takes an oath by the gold of the temple is bound by his oath. Blind fools! For which is greater, the gold of the temple that's sanctified the gold? You'll have to forgive me. I'm a little tired today. I read that wrong. We'll just go right back over it. And this is verse 17, Matthew 23:17. Blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctified the gold? I'm not illiterate, I promise. Also, whoever takes an oath by the altar, it means nothing, but whoever takes an oath by the gift that is on it is bound by his oath. Blind people, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, the one who takes an oath by the altar takes an oath by it and by everything on it. The one who takes an oath by the temple takes an oath by it and by him who dwells in it. And the one who takes an oath by heaven takes an oath by God's throne and by him who sits on it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You pay a tenth of mint, dill, and cumin, and yet you have neglected the most important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. These things should have been done without neglecting the others. Blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but gulp down a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee! First clean the inside of the cup, so that the outside of it may also become clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of the bones of the dead and every kind of impurity. In the same way, on the outside you seem righteous to people, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, if we have lived in the days of our ancestors, we wouldn't have taken part with them in shedding the prophets' blood. So you testify against yourselves that you are descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your ancestors' sins. Snakes, brood of vipers, how can you escape being condemned to hell? This is why I am sending you prophets, sages, and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. So all the righteous blood shed on the earth will be charged of you. From the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I tell you, all these things will come on this generation. If you think about every other religion, if they speak of a heaven, they speak of how to get there, and all of them tell you what actions to do to get you there. Only through Christ does it say, come as you are, have faith in me, and you will enter the kingdom of heaven. And that's not, obviously, that's not a verse. That is the message. Christ is Lord and Savior. He is God in flesh who came down, suffered, and died for our sins. And all you have to do to go where He is give your life to Him. Yes, do good works so that you may be an example to others. Yes, do good works so that you may reopen the eyes of those who have been wronged by people in the church, who simply maybe were new in the faith and hurt them, or perhaps only claimed Christianity and are not a Christian. Islam tells you what you can do to make it into heaven. It doesn't say that Allah is going to come down and die for you. Hinduism believes in reincarnation. You do good deeds in this life, you'll get a better life next time. You do bad deeds, you get a worse life. So maybe you'll come back as a grasshopper, maybe you'll come back as a prince. You keep doing good things over time, and as they even out, as your evil and your good even out. Once they become even, you become part of Brahma or something, and that's when you get to heaven. You get taken out of the reincarnation cycle. Judaism, I don't even really want to get into that. We're not going to get into all of their rabbinical texts that are not even really heretical so much as they're pure evil. But the Torah specifically and the practices therein. Not the Torah. It's not the Torah. I'm tired of calling it that. Anything that is read and is part of the Holy Bible, it is part of the Christian faith, is not part of Judaism. It is not the Torah. It is the Old Testament and the New Testament in one solid flow from beginning to now. That is what Christianity is. Those that did not cling to Christ are broken off and cast out of that covenant because they chose not to stay in it. Not because God said, no, you're not part of it anymore. I don't like you anymore. You were a chosen people, but now you're not. You're the chosen people. You just stay in the covenant, stay with my son, love my son. And when you go, no, we don't want to do that, because that requires giving up the earthly things. That requires humbling ourselves. How about you you treat us the same way you always have and just bless us in random places. Let us go in and take land. No, that's not how it's called. That's not what we're called to do anymore. So if you break off a covenant, God never breaks it off. God does not break his promises. God does not break his covenant. But you're not going to see the blessings of that covenant if you walk away. You're not going to win the lottery if you buy a lottery ticket and then throw it away. They might draw those numbers, and they're going to know that a ticket was bought at this gas station. But you walked away. You didn't hold up your end of the bargain. So you're not going to win the lottery. And that's kind of how I see Judaism. You walked away. God didn't leave you. You walked away, and therefore you're not in the kingdom of heaven. You're not part of the kingdom of heaven. You are not God's chosen people. God's chosen people are any person who chooses Christ. I'm tired of this debate on Israel, and everything that they use is just this circular argument. It's like, oh, they're God's people because it says so in the Old Testament. Yeah, bless Israel and you'll be blessed. It never says that. It talks about Abraham. It talks to Abraham. It says thy seed. Thy seed, not seeds, thy seed is speaking of Christ, Jesus Christ. So I can't hold to the belief that Jews are somehow God's chosen people anymore. Because it's not Jews, it is the Hebraic people, the Hebrews. They claim the Jew name because they're not the same as they once were. And they claim that name because they can combine their faith with their race. And then if you criticize either one of them, they say, oh, no, you're anti-Semitic. No, I'm not. I am pro-Christ. I'm not anti-Semitic. Anyways, that was a tangent because that's the one that gets ignored the most, and it just pains me to see so many people that, I can look at their walk with Christ and their relationship with God in their life and go, yes, they have the fruits of the Spirit. And some people have used that very admittance from me that, oh yeah, no, they have the fruits of a relationship with Christ. Is like, well, then maybe they're right on Israel. Like, well, so do I. I also have the fruits of my faith, and I don't believe that they're part of. I don't believe that they're God's chosen people anymore. I don't think that we got wrapped in with them or that we replaced them. I simply believe that the term chosen people is not really useful these days. Chosen people are who choose Him. Now, anyway, he's talking about the Old Testament, like I was trying to get into earlier. It's got 613 laws, I believe, that you have to follow to get to heaven, or some mess, or to stay pure, and it's literally impossible. Like you can't do that without Christ. Now, there's a theological debate that once you are saved, you can go throughout the rest of your life sinless. And I've heard a lot of people say, like, no, that's not how it works. We're sinners forever. We're just saved by grace. And I like how my old youth pastor, I look upon him quite highly. I respect him. He's always said, like saying that you're a sinner, that you are a sinner saved by grace is like saying, yeah, I'm like a pile of crap that got Windex sprayed on it. It's still a pile of crap. It's just that the outside is not smell quite as bad. No. You are completely cleansed. And therefore, if you have the faith, if you have faith strong enough, then once you are saved, you don't have to sin. And every sin is a choice. I don't believe that you can sin without choosing to sin. You can't get dragged into something like that. Perhaps you can without Christ. Perhaps you can without the Holy Spirit. But you can't if you are saved. Every sin after the point of your salvation is a choice from you and you alone. You can't blame anyone else. You can't complain that, oh, my circumstances made me do it. And you can't explain away the fact that you did, like try to justify that sin. No. It's a mistake. Own up to it. Ask for forgiveness. Repent. And it will be cast into the sea of forgetfulness. God doesn't have a mind like ours. Our mind mirrors His, but it's not as capable as His. When it comes to men, I heard Billy Graham talking about this not too long ago. I've started listening to some of his old sermons. A man can do wrong by you, and 20 years later you'll be talking to him, and you'll remember this, and you're like, I forgave you, but I never forgot. I forgave you, but I never forgot. But God doesn't do that. When God forgives you, whatever you did is gone. He doesn't know about it. It's cast from His mind. Now, I know that that's kind of a weird thought. Like God is all-knowing. Yes, He is. But He's also full of grace. He is grace. And His mind is not like ours. That doesn't mean you can't remind Him of it. If you just keep sitting in something, it's not even that you're sitting in sin. It's just that you keep bringing up one that you already did, like you did a long time ago, and you just can't get over it yourself. It's like every time you ask, you're like, God, can you forgive me for this? He's like, I forgot about that. Why'd you bring that up? There, forgiven. Don't bring it up again. And then you come back next time, and it's just this endless cycle where it's like, dude, just stop. Just shut up. Get over yourself, because if you think that Christ's sacrifice and God's mercy is not enough to get rid of this sin fully, then that's just pride. You somehow think that you're more powerful, that your actions can overpower the choices of God the Father. And He sits outside of time and reality, and He can forget when He forgives. He doesn't just forgive. But He's the only one that does that, because it's the only faith, the only religion that's true. Now, I don't think of Christianity as religion. I know it's lumped into it and all that, but as someone who is right, who is correct in his thinking, because I am a Christian, which means that my faith is right. It's faith in relationship with a God, with God, not with a God, with God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Everyone else, every other kind of faith, quotation marks if you're listening and not watching, is a religion, because you worship something that's false. They worship something that's false. So it has to be built up in religion, because religion is actions. And I think that's what a lot of Protestants have against the Catholic Church. I'm a non-denominational Christian, so I am a Protestant, but I don't cling to any Baptist doctrine or Methodist doctrine or Lutheran doctrine or any of that. And I also don't cast out Catholics completely or anything like that. Now, Mormons got it wrong. Like I'm not going to get into that. Mormons are wrong. If you ever want to ask questions about it, maybe I'll get into it then. But outside of that, no. Mormons are like American Muslims. That's what they are. Jehovah's Witnesses, they're kind of weird. 144,000 people are going to heaven. What? You don't think that there's been 144,000 people going to... If you really think that it's capped off at that, then why are you going door to door bothering everybody? Because you're not going either, so why bother us? Anyways, it might get me in a little bit of hot water, but I don't really care. I'm not the kind that cares about things like that. I don't even remember where I was. Oh, Catholics. They don't think they're getting to heaven by works like so many Protestants say. You talk to a Catholic very much at all with any kind of listening skills. And it's like, no. We don't think that our salvation comes from works. We just think that works are part of faith. Like, by faith, or by works your faith will be proven, that kind of thing. And I got to say, that's a good arguing point, because when you look at every sect of Christianity, which sect has done the most good for the world in modern times? I know they're also the ones that did the Crusades, and some people will go like, well, that's something that they did that was wrong, and I'm just going to sit here and say, no, it wasn't. It wasn't wrong. It was a defensive war, at least the first time. Men are corrupt, so there's definitely a few of those Crusades that were not justified. But to say that all of them were unjustified is just flat wrong. Europe would have been completely overrun and taken over by Muslims had Christians of that time, Catholics, went in and retaken the Holy Land, retaken the area of Spain, the Reconquista. But just think modern times, like they're the ones that have the most charities. They're the ones that help people the most. Now they get a little off course sometimes and don't stick within the rule of law as this Protestant nation has brought about. Like, you shouldn't be housing illegal immigrants because it's part of your faith or something. Like, no, this is America. Be a United States citizen or get out. And I don't care what religion you are. If you're a Christian, then go home and fix your country. And that sounds cruel to a lot of people, and even me. There's like this little pinch on my shoulder where it's like, it's a little rough to say. It's more of a thought, not really a word that you should talk about. But whatever. I'm thinking it. I'm thinking about it for a little while, and I'm still deciding to say it, which means I don't think I'm wrong. And there's mercy in things, like if you're a mom or something with this little child, and it can be proven that that's your kid, and it can be proven that you're in real danger, and it can be proven that you are in fact a Christian, then yeah, sure, maybe stick around in the United States on asylum or something for a little while. But as soon as you're not in immediate danger anymore, you're going home. You're not part of this nation. And this nation was not built by immigrants. This nation was built by frontiersmen. That's just how it is. People have thrown faith and love in their propaganda for years now, where it's like, oh, we do this because of faith and love. Oh, we do this because of tolerance. You do this because you're freaking wrong. That's why you do it. You don't interpret Scripture, right? You don't interpret how a country survives, right? You don't know how a nation works. You don't know what a republic is and how republics fall. So everything you're doing, you can't slap faith and love over it and think that's going to protect you from scrutiny. That's going to bring the most scrutiny on you. At least from people who know what faith and love is. My faith is strong because I've been brought out of dark times, because I have been loved when I was not worth loving. Not because someone just sat there and let me keep sitting in my wrongness. No, because true love is correction. I wouldn't be where I am today if there weren't people that would come about and go like, hey man, what you're doing, it's not right. Fix yourself. And if you ask them how, they tell you. They don't just go, oh, I don't know, just fix yourself. Something we got told the other day by Mr. Chris Dunham in a class here at the Patriot Institute is that you should never complain about a problem if you don't have a solution. Now, my solutions to most problems, I will admit, and I will not apologize for, because I don't think I'm wrong. I don't tend to think I'm wrong. I'm not so proud that I won't admit when I am wrong. But also, if you hear me say something, then I do think I'm right. And most of my solutions to problems are extreme. I'm kind of... Before I say this, let me clarify. I believe I know what McCarthyism is. If I am wrong in what I'm about to say, then I will simply explain my worldview. But I believe the label is McCarthyism. But what I think is that you can just take in the immigrants that you think will promote American values. And one of the biggest values in my eyes that is American is the Christian household, the Protestant Christian household. Most of the rest of the world, the main religions are going to be Catholic, besides like Germany, which is mostly Lutheran, which are just like off-brand Catholics. Like Luther wasn't going to split from the church, Catholics excommunicated him. He wasn't trying to become a Protestant. It was just like, well, if I can't go to Catholic church, I guess I'll just do church here. So it has a lot of the same tendencies. So saying they're an off-brand Catholic is not, I'm not trying to insult them. I'm just saying that's kind of what they are, because the original intent was never to leave the church. He was just trying to ask questions. He wasn't even like trying to prove them wrong. He was just like, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? What does this mean? And they just, instead of answering him at the time, they were like, you're questioning us? And just kicked him out. They wanted him dead. I don't remember for sure. I don't think they killed Martin Luther, but maybe they did. I don't know. I'm not as caught up on him. But to dive into my view a little more, I think that when you're bringing in immigrants, bring them in from countries that are friendly to the United States, bring them in from places where even if those people are not Christians, they're raised on morality and Christian values. And I would even go so far as to say, don't let them come in if they're not Christians. Have some kind of way to figure out if they are. And you'll go, oh no, you can't do that because the First Amendment says that you have the right to choose what religion you are. And to that I would say, yes, you do. If you are an American citizen, you have a right to choose what religion you are. If you're immigrating here, you're not an American citizen. You don't have that right. We can allow you to worship whatever you want, but that doesn't mean we have to help you do that. That doesn't mean we have to promote your religion. That just means that we can't outright say, nope, that's illegal, and ship you out because you do that. So we can't deport all Muslims. It's not something that we're going to do. But that doesn't mean we have to help them grow. They can believe in Islam without being able to practice Sharia law. Texas just banned Sharia law. It came after an executive order. The House and Senate finally passed a bill where Texas is officially Sharia free, and if they are caught practicing it, jail time. Which is good. We shouldn't be doing anything that promotes Islam because this is not an Islamic nation. It is a Christian country. Just like it's not a Judaic nation, it is a Christian country. So beliefs that stem from Judaism should be pushed away and put down. Usury is illegal. Interest is illegal in the Bible. You cannot charge interest. But Judaism says, yeah, you can. You can charge interest to anyone that's not a Jew. I'm not a Jew, so they can charge me interest. No. And that belief has just spread to the point where it's like now everybody, including Christians, are like, charge them interest. Let's charge some interest. Let's make some money on that. And that just stems from a belief that people have the right to own things that they didn't work for. And, it's not... People are going to be how people are going to be. I can accept gifts. And when it comes to, say, interest, people will try to use the parable of the talents on that. And it was like, well, wait a minute. No. That wasn't saying to charge interest. The guy, the master never said, bring me back more than I gave you. He just entrusted them with gold and expected them to do something with it. And obviously they don't dive into this, but my belief is because we know the interest is illegal, had that servant that just held on and buried his in the ground, had he done something with it, he went out and made 2 more talents. He had 3. Said, I made 3, but master, I ask that you allow me to keep these 2 so that I can make 5 and then 6. I think the master would be like, yeah, you can do that. Pay me back my 1, and you can keep the extra 2. And he'd let him go on his way. you're not told that you can't accept more than what you give. It's just that you can't charge more than what you give. So yeah, no, get rid of interest, get rid of Sharia law. I can't really think of it. As much as I don't agree with Hinduism and Buddhism and all that mess, it's like I don't really see any. There's not like giant populations of Buddhists and Hindus in the United States, so they're not really affecting anything. Right now, it's mostly just fault. To be honest, most bad laws come from Islamic representatives or like Christian mascot representatives. So they're like, yeah, I'm a Christian. Here's this, abortion. It's like, whoa, that's not Christian. That's baby murder. That is satanic. That is child sacrifice. You should probably be hung. You killed somebody. You allowed them to be killed. You said that person doesn't have any rights. And you said to someone else, you do have the right to kill that person. That makes you an accessory to murder. And I think anyone that's connected to murder in the way that it's pre-planned, not like, yeah, I'm related to the guy, so I guess I get death too. No. If you're part of the process that leads to that murder, then you should also be killed. Whosoever shed man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. And that is Genesis 9:6. It's the Noahic covenant. People try to say everything in the Old Testament doesn't apply these days. It's all just love. Love your neighbor and love God. And it's like, yeah, love your neighbor and love God. How do you love your neighbor more than protecting him from evil? This isn't an eye for an eye, hand for a hand, foot for a foot type situation. It is a you killed a man, and therefore you must die. I'm going to find a passage real quick that it kind of struck me as like, I think this is actually an argument for capital punishment in the New Testament. And you don't really see many things that justify any kind of violence whatsoever in the New Testament outside of Revelation, where it's about war and Jesus going in and driving people out from the temple, which that's honestly something that needs to be fought pretty hard. There's a lot of non-Christians leading churches. If you're gay, you shouldn't be a pastor. Anyways, let me find this real quick. 1 John 5:16. If anyone sees a fellow believer committing a sin that doesn't lead to death, he should ask, and God will give life to him. Doesn't lead to death. So your sin, the sin that you committed, did not cause the death of someone else. To those who commit sin that doesn't lead to death, there is sin that leads to death. I am not saying that he should pray about that. All unrighteousness is sin, and there is sin that doesn't lead to death. And that's not saying that's like we know that if you sin, you have a sin nature. You're going to die. This is saying that death won't be brought further on. And I read this as death meaning two different ways at once. If you commit sin that doesn't lead to death, so say the death does not lead to the death of another, then you can be forgiven because that sin didn't lead to death, therefore it doesn't lead to your death either. But if you commit sin that does lead to death, so it leads to the death of another, then it also leads to your death. Now, I might be interpreting this wrong, but it's my belief that this does kind of represent the argument for the death penalty in the New Testament. If I'm wrong, I'd like to hear out the other interpretation of it, because this one has confused me for a while. I've read 1 John. 1 John is probably my favorite book in the Bible. I've read it a lot. You can hardly read the pages on this one just because it's got so many highlights and notes and underlines. Versus there's other books where it's like 2 or 3 things are highlighted because I'm just not getting it. I'm not understanding what's going on. But 1 John, it's awesome. But yeah, no, I mean, if you cause or bring about the cause or commit a sin that leads to death, murder, manslaughter, abortion, which is murder, then you should also be put to death. A life sentence is not justifiable. Extended death row sits are not justifiable. 3 or 4 years at the most. I could see an argument for giving 10 to 15 whenever all the DNA science and all of that stuff was still pretty new. But they've kind of got a hang on things now, and it's like, if you haven't been proven innocent in 2 to 3 years, you did it, But our justice system is so screwed up because of lawyers that, like, you can appeal for 30, 40 years, so you'll just sit in death row. Like, I killed somebody, and you might be 40 when you got there, so you might just die in prison. It's not even that you got put to death. It's that you just lived the rest of your life, 3 hots in a cot, air conditioning, maybe a little bit of working on license plates, picking cotton or planting tomatoes or something on some of the farm prisons. And then you just die. Just a life inside. You didn't have to take care of yourself for nothing, and everybody else was paying for it. 2 to 3 years tops. If you haven't been proven innocent, death. And I'm a proponent for public execution as well. I don't think that there's a need to have them be private. Maybe if the family of the one that was slain requests a private execution, I can understand that. They don't want a bunch of attention drawn to them. They're dealing with a lot of grief. Execute that guy in private. But if they don't request it, public, show people what happens when you break the law. Go Old Western on them. I grew up on Old Westerns, and I'm not saying go around having a posse take care of it, No riots. There must be due process according to the Constitution and according to morality. You can't go around just hanging people from a tree just because you don't like them. You got to go through the justice system, but you need to reform the justice system. The man that killed Irina Zarutsky, if I'm saying that right, the Ukrainian girl on that train in North Carolina, he got life in prison. He didn't get the death penalty. He got life in prison. And he fell to the floor and cried like a little whiny baby, because that's what he is. He's a little guy that has just whined and complained his entire life, never tried to make anything of himself, and killed this girl for no reason. Pure evil. And he cried like a baby whenever he got the life sentence. It's like, you got off easy because you're a murderer, and if I got my way, you'd be dead in 3 days. Because that's proven. Witnesses, video camera, DNA evidence, fingerprints on the knife. It's like, you killed that girl. You don't get 2 to 3 years. You should be dead in a week. But no. Life in prison. And he's not very old, which means the taxpayers of North Carolina are going to have to take care of him for years to come. And that's not justice. That's not justice. Even if Charlie Kirk's killer, Tyler Robinson, even if he gets the death penalty, there's no telling how long he'll sit in jail and request appeals and all that. Honestly, if he is tied to any kind of conspiracy, then he might go to jail on a life sentence and be dead in a week anyways, because he just got shanked in some random murder. Like, no. If he dies very quick after going in and it's not because he got the death penalty, somebody killed him. He's tied to something. If he just goes it goes away. If there's no swift execution, if there's no swift murder, it probably wasn't one-off. It probably wasn't tied to anybody. It's just a crazy dude that planned this out with a bunch of liberal buddies. And anybody that's saying still, like anybody on the left that's going like, well, maybe he was a MAGA Republic. Shut up. No, he wasn't. He was not a MAGA Republican. He wasn't a Republican. He wasn't right-wing. He had a gay, trans, whatever the frick, anything that's not straight is just gay. I don't give a crap what you label yourself. If you're not falling under the intent of God, you're gay. Like that's the best label for it. He was in liberal Discord chats. He wrote those stupid meme. I mean, it's. I'm already mad that someone would do this to a man like Charlie Kirk. But it was done by a complete loser on top of that. It's like, dude, what kind of life did you live? I hope that whatever time he gets in prison, he's somebody is bold enough and strong enough in their faith and connected well enough to get in that cell with him and share the gospel and share it in a way that it connects with him. There's nothing better that could come out of this than the assassin of Charlie Kirk finding Christ. He wouldn't forgive himself, but if he found Christ, if he gained salvation through this act, that is the ultimate message of what Charlie Kirk stood for. Oh man, I'm going to end with this. I was elected to the Patriot Academy National Leadership Congress Cabinet. I'm the Speaker of the House. And you'll hear more about Patriot Academy going forth. They're where I've gotten a lot of my training, not so much my viewpoints. I kind of make those myself. But I sent out some encouragement. And I guess I sent the encouragement to the person that's supposed to send it out. I don't actually know if she sent it out yet. And I was reminded whenever everybody was talking about picking up a bloodstained mic. I'm like, this is an Elisha and Elijah moment. Elisha picked up Elijah's mantle. He picked up his robe and went forth in his footsteps. And that kind of symbolizes picking up that microphone of Charlie's. That's one I've got here. But what did Elisha do first? He boldly asked Elijah. And I know he didn't ask God, but if you're asking a prophet of the Lord, then you're asking in the face of God. When Elijah asked him, "What can I do for you before I leave this earth?" He said, "Let me have 2 shares of your spirit." And going forth, you can't separate other aspects of your life from your faith. It's not a category that can be boxed off like people have in the past. Going forth, you have to be outspoken in your faith. Be bold and ask for 2 shares of Charlie's spirit. We can make a difference, but we can't make one if we're not willing. We can't make one if we're not willing to follow in his exact footsteps. If we're not willing to also put ourselves in danger, if we're not willing to stand on the truth and stand on our beliefs to the point of death, then don't stand up at all. Because at that point, you're just a hypocrite. You're that whitewashed tomb full of all uncleanness. How will you escape from being condemned to hell? My name is Brody Huff, and you are listening to The Southern Steel Show. Until next time, may God bless you.